Welcome back to the Solid Verbal Boys and Girls. My name is Ty Hildenbrand. That fine gentleman over there, as always, the illustrious, looking tan from his time in Spain, Dan Rubenstein, sir. How are you?
Oh, you know how I do, Ty. Spending all that time in Barcelona.
Barth, you got to get the TH, yeah.
Now, I spent a lot of that time walking around and thinking about college football and college football podcasting. Despite my best efforts, I was checking like the college football subreddit and all the different sources I have for college football information. And I also, this is totally true, and this will be a really crucial segue opportunity for you. Did you see that an Alabama fan spotted Nick Saban in Florence?
Spotted in Italy. Rick Riley spotted him in Rome. There were other Alabama alums that spotted him elsewhere throughout Italy.
I was eagle-eyed, not just looking for Nick Saban, but any other major college football coach on vacation in Europe, and all I saw was Ryan Day. No, that was a joke. That was not nice. That was not nice, Ty. Why would I do that? He's a very good coach.
Oh, damn.
But no, I did have my eyes open to try and spot someone just like, what is Nick Saban going to look like eating patatas bravas?
Yeah, and wearing free Alabama gear.
Yes.
He was sporting Alabama gear all throughout Italy, throughout Europe. Welcome back to the show. I'm Ty. He's Dan. Today, a little bit later on in today's episode, we are going to go through 12 group of 5 schedules. Go back and listen to the Power 5 conference schedule previews that we did. Those were our last 5 episodes. We started with the Big Ten and the SEC. We rolled through last week the Pac-12 and ACC. And then our first episode earlier this week on Tuesday, was the Big 12. We've got a selection of teams, the Dirty Dozen or so, group of 5 teams that were of particular interest to Dan and I. We're going to give those teams the same treatment. We obviously can't get to all of them, but we're going to do our level best. If you like the show, hit subscribe or follow. Please go on out on social media if that is a thing that you have. And you can follow us if you want to. That'd be nice. However, it would be more appropriate at this juncture to just share the Solid Verbal with your friends. Let people know what it is that we do here. We are welcoming new folks into the Verballerhood under our umbrella. Ella, Dan, we are very excited.
Don't do that.
Very excited to invite new folks under the big tent that is the Verbal. Going out to verballers.com if you are ever so inclined, if you really want to help support what we do. And of course, we post videos all the time, 5 days a week at a minimum, out on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@solidverbal/the Solid Verbal, whichever nomenclature you prefer.
Yeah, I have nothing left to add, I don't think. Should we get into some news?
Hold on. Now, you do have something to add. Hold on. You blew up my spot on the last episode. Because,
what did I do?
No, here's what you did. What I've been trying to do is keep these episodes self-contained and focused almost entirely on schedule previews. Because my thought is people can go back later after the fact and they can download and they can listen and then they can roll into previews. Then we can roll right into week 1. We're trying to pave the way for the college football fan of a month and a half, 2 months from now, who wants to get caught up to speed on everything going on in time for the 23 season.
Are you going to deny me the opportunity to co-host an Encanto-themed college football show? You're not going to squeeze in time to do something?
No, what I'm saying is you come back from Spain, you're shot out of a cannon, you've got all the right energy, and you interrupt my flow by saying, should we talk about news? No! Now we talk about news.
Hi. Okay. I don't know. Fast forward this if this is something you're listening to in late July or something.
This is BTS coverage right here. You're getting
that's true.
The excess content that you've always desired. You have SEC 8-game conference schedule thoughts, do you not?
Well, maybe it's just because it is early June, late May when all of this was happening, when it's not necessarily the most robust time for college football news. But, and I think it was Scott Docterman, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, from The Athletic, posted how many Power 5 opponents, teams from the Big 12, Big 10, SEC, ACC, Pac-12 are all playing, and it's like 10, 11, 10, 9, SEC.
I have it in front of me.
Playing 2 SEC teams are playing 10 Power 5 opponents, I believe.
Teams playing at least 10 Power 5 opponents in 2023. The SEC is 2 of 14. The ACC is 10 of 15. I'm assuming they're counting Notre Dame in there.
Notre Dame.
The Pac-12 is 10 of 12. The Big 12 is 11 of 14. And the Big 10 is 13 of 14. So the SEC, at least in that sense, bringing up the rear.
Yes, in that sense. And so there was a vote, and some schools like Alabama, Nick Saban, were more in favor of 8. And some of that has to do with the fact that, like, okay, if we're going to go to 9, are we going to have the 3 permanent rivalry games and then the rotation of 6, right? The pod-ish situation of scheduling for the SEC, with Alabama likely, whenever it is that they do go to 9, because it seems inevitable, it would be LSU, Auburn, and Tennessee. And Nick Saban was like, well, that's not fair, as if they already don't play them every season.
Here is the context, right, for anyone who just landed here.
Yes.
The SEC is adding 2 new teams next year, Texas and Oklahoma. They become a 16-team conference. It was widely assumed that they were going to get rid of their divisions. Next season, of course, they put that through. But also there was this open question about how many conference games do we want to play? The 2 options were 8 conference games and 1 annual rival, including 1 annual rival, or 9 conference games, including 3 annual rivals. We took a poll out on our newsletter. 97% of the respondents favored 9 games. But if you believe Brett McMurphy, our friend who we've had on the show, only Florida, Georgia, LSU, Missouri, and Texas A&M voted in favor when they put it to vote at the SEC meetings. Texas and Oklahoma reportedly are in favor as well, but being so they're not actually in the SEC yet, they don't have a vote. So you can do the math. You can figure out who voted this down. You've got teams like Alabama. You've got Ole Miss, Mississippi State. You can, again, figure this out in your own time. But my sense, Dan, from what you're describing here is if you're the SEC, if you're seeing that 2 of 14 number, despite the fact that you've got arguably the best conference in college football, you should still want to play more of your own?
Well, I think it's complicated. So I am of the mind that, and the reason that what Greg Sankey talked about and the reason the conference as a whole, what they talked about is the story is that they went to Disney, ESPN, their bosses. Let's be very clear. SEC football is a television program. And if you think it's, the history, no, it's a TV show. We've all decided, because the conference has said we're going to be funded by Disney or Fox or News Corp, whatever, that we are TV shows. And so I guess there's one of 3 situations that were either existing within or could have happened. One, Disney/ESPN said, we want 9 games a year immediately with this new deal. And the SEC said, nope. And that was a negotiation. That was a plot point in that negotiation. 2, ESPN and Disney said, we want to keep our hands off, right? You guys are the sports people, and we just want the good inventory, whatever that is. We'll show it, ABC Saturdays, all that stuff. And, we feel like we're overstepping. And 3 is, let's just agree that you will go to 9 games, and you can decide on the timing in the next 3 years. If you want to do it this year, great. If you want to do it in 2 years, great. If you want to do it in 3 years, great. And so there will be votes. I don't know which of those is true. Maybe there's a 4th thing. I don't know. But that's where my mind went. And so the Nick Saban thing is funny because when you listen to some of his quotes, it's like, it's a lot of change all at once. It's a very old man, like, the breakfast hours at my favorite diner changed, and I don't know what's going on. Like, there was that element to what he talked about. And I'm oversimplifying, and I'm sure it's more complicated, whatever. But he did have quotes that were like, if we go to this, and then we want non-conference games with Power 5 teams. What we're really talking about is 8 is nicer for bowl eligibility, because teams that are playoff worthy in the SEC, likely 12, the gulf between 12-0 and 10-2 probably still gets you into the playoff regardless, depending on obviously the context of those 2 losses, whatever. It's bad for football. It's bad for the sport to play 8 conference games. I think we would all agree. When you could play 9, when you could charge more of a premium, when you could give your own fans a better product instead of charging them for Mercer or Samford or Sam Houston, all due respect to those programs. But that's a bad product if you're, an LSU fan and you're like, well, cool, I get to watch this. So I think we're absolutely going to get there. It's inevitable. But at the same time, going back to the TV show thing, and you know this because you're the community you run in with all those big actors and stuff.
Sure.
You know how this works.
I know it.
But the industry as such, we're like, okay, so if this is a TV show, you are being paid for the number of episodes that you are contractually obligated to do. And so if the SEC said, our deal is this, it's X, we'll play 8 games, and Disney said, fine, deal. Why would you give somebody something extra at the same rate, right?
And this is what Jeff Schultz wrote over on The Athletic. And I read this quote verbatim from The Athletic's college football Twitter account. Maybe this 8 conference game schedule charade is just a dance to squeeze more money out of ESPN.
Sure.
Here's a thought, do the right thing first. So he's advocating, yes, we should go to 9 games per season. It's better for the sport. However, there is that added dimension of the business and how much are they being paid? And does ESPN even want to give more money into the SEC? I would imagine they'd be on board for it, but nonetheless, I can't speak for them. So it's complicated on the surface, I think, from our perspective, just as fans. Of course, we want to see 9. Why wouldn't you do 9? Why wouldn't you want to preserve 3 rivalries a year? Rivalries, the argument that I made is that I want to see as many rivalries preserved as I can, especially in this day and age where it seems like they're kind of an afterthought in the wake of some of the big money moves that we've seen on the media side. But that being what it is a lot more nuanced and complicated a discussion because of all the contractual stuff that we will no doubt hear a lot more about here in the coming days and weeks, especially with all the Pac-12 stuff swirling.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is not a sport that is for its fans. It's not a sport that's for the health of its own sport at any level, right? We have all these little fiefdoms that, like, if we had conferences, if we had people running the sport that were looking out for the long-term health of the sport, we wouldn't have any of this, right?
No.
The Big Ten's looking out for the Big Ten, the SEC is looking out for the SEC, ESPN's looking out for ESPN. There's nobody actually saying, what is healthy for people who want to enjoy the sport but haven't yet started or have been enjoying the sport for 40 years? None of that is considered, right? You look at how much does it cost to park at a meaningless game in September, right? It's all garbage. So all of these conferences, all of these TV networks, everybody's just getting it while the getting's good. It's not going to last forever, and we'll see what happens, but that's why we are where we are. And so the only way you can change this as a fan, don't go to the games against crappy FCS opponents.
Boycott.
Don't go. Buy a VPN and stream it illegally. I don't know. I'm not saying definitely do this, but if you feel passionately about it, go tailgate with your friends outside of the stadium and watch it on a TV, again, illegally, outside, and force a bunch of sports writers to canvass the internet with a shot of 50,000 empty seats at Bryant-Denny or wherever. That's your only real recourse, is shaming these people. Otherwise, we'll get there. It's a bad product, and you'll have people like Jimbo Fisher say, like, it's important for the health of the sport to play an FCS program to keep that alive, and then they go recruit the best players from those FCS programs to fill out their rosters every January. Nobody's actually looking out for the health of the sport.
No.
And so what I say, watch the games you want to watch, don't watch the games you don't want to watch, and just be merry and be happy.
It's something we've said for a long time, that nobody's running this. It's part of what makes it interesting and part of what gives it the charm. It also makes it always being on the brink of total annihilation.
Yes.
We are always just a stiff breeze away from the whole thing going bust. But
if you were at a day job more recently than I was. I've been doing this crazy, weird media stuff for a long time. If somebody said to you, above you, said, hey, exact same job, Ty. We're paying you the exact same money. You're doing the exact same work. Also, you're going to manage 100 more people than you did last year. We're not going to pay you any extra.
Right.
There's going to be many more hours and responsibilities, but same bottom line for you. I don't know if that's the best thing that would run through your brain, right?
No. And by the way, that happens all the time to people out there.
It happens all the time, and it's terrible.
A shame, and it sucks, but that is the reality in which we live. Yeah. Anyway.
But
crazy.
The SEC has the leverage to say, nah.
No.
And that's why we're here.
They will get there in due time. I think it's a matter of when, not if, but at least for the inaugural season featuring Texas and Oklahoma, we're going to see 8 conference games, including that one annual rival. Elsewhere on the conference side of things, just a few notes that we'll throw out there. Quote unquote substantive talks. If you believe Dennis Dodd, between Colorado and the Big 12, it seems as though the Colorado to Big 12 rumors have persisted. I don't know if we are any closer to that actually happening or not. I feel like each week comes and goes, we hear about 4 new rumors. The one thing that I do think is interesting, I've been following it pretty closely, is the whole aspect of San Diego State potentially joining the Pac-12, Pac-10, whatever number it ends up being at the end of summer. From what I understand, there's a bit of a buyout deadline of sorts at the end of June. So if it's going to happen, it would financially behoove the Aztecs to make that move before the end of the month. We had been hearing for a while. You might recall earlier in the springtime, we were going to know by the end of the NCAA tournament where things stood with this Pac-12 media deal that they're in the process of negotiating. That was bumped until later this summer. George Kliavkoff needed a little bit more time. Rumors of ESPN maybe being in, maybe not being in, Fox sort of taking a wait-and-see approach. It seemed as if the major networks were really just waiting for some sort of deal to fall off the back of a truck, not really willing to go out there and invest heavily in order to get the product. But if it's available and if there's a deal to be had, they'd be foolish to not take it. I don't know where things stand on that front. I feel, again, like we hear something different every month, every week. But alas, Colorado deciding that it decides at some point to leave the Pac-12 and go over to the Big 12 would definitely create a shockwave. It would be the kind of thing that I think would ultimately lead to the demise of the Pac-12. Of course, it's a very fantastical angle that we will cover in due time only if we have to, because we are not rooting for it. But that's coming down the pike. We will find out, I think, soon enough.
Did you see the end of that story, the Dennis Dodd story about Colorado having substantive talks with the Big 12?
Did I see
it was tagged at the end. Like, it was sort of like an afterthought, but it was like, not to mention, Brett Yormark is the strongest and most handsome man to be a conference commissioner. And I thought it was sort of out of place.
It's kind. It's very kind.
And just like, he has a morning regimen that, all of his doctors say he's got the body of a 30-year-old. And it's just like, wow, this is a very detailed look at Brett Yormark. But look, kudos to all of that reporting.
Drinking straight from the Big 12 fire hose when we write these articles.
Look, if the best of Colorado happens, which I say is less likely than the worst of Colorado happening in the next 2 years, just because overhauling a roster like this, and if it works, Deion's gone. If it doesn't work, Deion's gone. So the Big 12 is getting themselves a Rutgers. And so congratulations, guys. If that happens, if it comes to pass, hope it works out for Colorado fans, honestly. And I'm being genuine here. I hope it works out for Colorado fans because they had a once proud degree of fandom rooting for the Buffs, and they've been the clear worst team in the Pac-12 over the last decade and are making moves because they happen to be near Denver. So I hope it works out genuinely for the Colorado fans who have watched a ton of terrible football this last decade or something.
There's absolutely a little bit of Randy Quaid at the end of Independence Day with this, where they're just going in cleats up. They're flying into the mothership and saying, be damned. This is our chance to do what's best for us and to make a statement. And I feel bad for the fan base. It's a great fan base. It's a great place for a college football team. There's a lot of tradition there. It was always, I think met with mixed emotions when they decided to leave the Big 12 at all. Going over the Pac-12, we can talk about that in due time. But we'll find out for sure if they decide they want to jump back into things with the Brett Yormark era version of the Big 12.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. And I will watch a lot of Big 12 football. I will watch Colorado and see what happens with them. I will obviously pay attention to this story. It would be kind of weird to have San Diego State in the Pac-12, but college football has changed, and it's time to accept that it's just going to move around constantly, and that's the sport we love and cherish and at times hate. And I don't know. I don't know what this means. We'll see.
All right. Well, here.
We'll see.
Let's go to more of a feel-good story. Maybe. I don't know. It depends where you stand on this. We actually have not talked about this since you came back.
Okay.
The Cheez-It Bowl is dead. Long live the Pop-Tarts Bowl, Dan.
Okay.
Pop-Tarts Bowl. So another hyphenated junk food taking over the mantle. You a Pop-Tarts guy? Like Pop-Tarts?
This is where you're going.
You give your kids Pop-Tarts? Where do you stand on Pop-Tarts
no.
as a food group, really?
I'm sure eventually they'll have some. But, you try to make it last as long as possible, giving them real food, all due respect to the wonderful people. Is it Kellogg's? Is that who makes Pop-Tarts?
Yes, I believe so.
Pop-Tarts are fine. They're tasty. They're science, right there. It's, I don't know if this means that the deal for that bowl and that bowl sponsorship just didn't do enough for the Cheez-It brand. Or they just it was just always going to be an experiment for a couple of years and they move forward. Are there multiple Cheez-It Bowls? Were there multiple Cheez-It Bowls or they just moved the location?
I mean, they've put on a Cheez-It Bowl, a couple years running. And I think there were other kind of sponsorships as well. But I posted out on our Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, sort of the long sordid tale that got us to the Pop-Tarts Bowl. This is a game that started back in the 90s as a Blockbuster Bowl. It's been renamed 10 times. Now it's the Pop-Tarts Bowl. These sponsorships change hands incredibly quickly. And outside of some of the majors, there's really a lot in the bowl world that has turned over the last 20, 30 years or so. So it's interesting. It was funny when Cheez-It got it to begin with. I'll tell you this, the question that I got the most was not about, was not sort of the sad emoji or anything like that. It was, are they going to dump a big vat of Pop-Tarts on the winning coach?
Oh, first of all, I just looked it up. The Cheez-It Bowl was in Arizona originally. Now it's the Guaranteed Rate Bowl.
Right,
and
right.
Then it shifted to Florida.
Yeah, they changed
and now
their
it's
allegiance.
the Pop-Tarts Bowl.
Yeah.
One, you do not dump a cooler full of Cheez-Its onto the winning coach. You very slowly dump a sludgy cooler of frosting onto the coach.
So this is a Duke's Mayo situation for you.
Well, Mayo runs out of a cooler a lot faster than frosting, I presume.
Only if you put water in it to water it down. Remember when they bonked Shane Beamer on the head? They bonked
him on the head because it was watered down?
No, they bonked him on the head because it wasn't watered down, and they were trying to get basically concrete out of that cooler.
Yes.
So the next year they watered it down, and then it was obviously much more disgusting. But if you keep frosting hot enough, or at least tepid enough, you're the baker between the two of us. You should know this. I would think it becomes more fluid and you could dump it out. You just can't get it off. It dries like wax.
Yeah, I think the actual Pop-Tart is a pretty uninteresting visual because it's just sort of a rectangle slapped with frosting and sometimes sprinkles or something on top of it, I think. I think where the Pop-Tart Bowl has to go is they have to lean into incorporating a giant toaster in an end zone. Whether it's like some sort of object or pyrotechnic coming out of the firework upon a touchdown or a field goal or something like that. The toaster, I feel like, is the literal and figurative electricity behind the Pop-Tart. That's what needs to be incorporated.
I don't hate this.
I'm not going to go fully giving the Pop-Tart Bowl a plan because that's what the geniuses on Madison Avenue are paid for. But I say lean into the toaster, and maybe the winning coach does something with a toaster oven. I don't know what that is. If there's a trampoline at the bottom of it and the head coach gets to jump out, but then we could be dealing with like a Mike Loxley torn ACL. I don't want that. Nobody's in favor of that. But yeah, I say incorporate that, and I don't know what else you do. If you have like snap, crackle, and pop, like the opening coin toss or something. I don't know. But good for the Pop-Tart brand. My assumption is they did not pay a lot of money for this.
Elsewhere, and we'll close out with this before we get to our Group of Five schedule preview. Gary Barta. Remember that crazy guy?
Yeah.
Gary Barta.
The guy who,
he's been the Iowa AD since 2006, I want to say. Like 17 years or so. The vast majority of the Kirk Ferentz era at Iowa. Gary Barta announced that he is retiring as of this August. For the time being, his deputy, Beth Getz or Gutz, I'm not exactly sure how you say it, Goetz, is going to be the interim athletic director. Stands to reason that she's the obvious candidate to take over on a full-time basis. Iowa has stated that they're not going to search officially, I think, until 2024 to find their long-term replacement. So she'll have a bit of bit of a, runway to figure out what's going on and establish herself as the new head honcho. The interesting tidbit, I think, for our purposes here, we poke a lot of fun at Iowa and the offense and Kirk Ferentz, where the program is headed. She has only been there since 2018 when she came over from Ball State. So She is not an Iowa lifer in the sense, at least not in the same way that Gary Barta has been. Would this be enough to potentially want to change things around? Not having that allegiance to the Ferentzes in the same way? I don't know. That's probably wishful thinking. The guy's got a contract through 2029. But It's just interesting because these little ripples sometimes can have a big impact a couple months down the line when folks start thinking about the permanence of their job and where they want to take programs. I don't know, just something to keep your eye on.
Yeah, I mean, if he has enough time left on his deal, that it's going to be ultimately up to the people who donate money to Iowa and Iowa football to say, all right, we'll foot the bill for the buyout.
Yep.
And, I assume because Iowa's one of those programs that treasures continuity and familiarity, obviously Kirk Ferentz being there for as long as he has and given the leeway to improve things when things are down and obviously, prove that he is capable as of a few years ago running the table during the regular season. He'll be given every opportunity to coach as long as he wants, unless they spend a ton of money for some sort of outsider who has the reputation for hiring awesome college football coaches. It doesn't seem like that's going to be the Iowa way. And so I suspect we're going to see more Ferentz, even if it's just one Ferentz on this staff.
We shall see. That's all I got, Dan, in terms of news. If you are ready to dive in to our Dirty Dozen Big Five or Group of Five teams, I should say.
Group of Five. Let's do it.
Let's do it. You got that sound still?
Of course I do.
Here we go. Let's start with Tulane.
Oh, my gosh, yes.
Again, we picked out 12 interesting Group of Five teams. I will emphasize these are not the only interesting Group of Five teams. Yeah. These were just the ones we had time for at the end of this episode. Tulane, by the way, went 12-2 last year. They beat USC in the bowl game. It was a really good season. I like where Tulane's at. Tulane this year has an over-under of 9.5, and they're in a great spot, I think, for two separate reasons. First off, they bring a lot back from the team last year, notably Michael Pratt, who at one point was transferring until he wasn't. They will be without Tajay Spears, some guys on defense, though they did do a good job, I think, in the portal building their defense back up. We could talk more about Tulane when we get to preview season.
Yeah.
Notably, with respect to the schedule, though, Cincy, Houston, and UCF all left. They all left the American to join the Big 12, which means that Tulane kind of has an inside track on getting back to the title game in the American. The non-con games on this schedule are against South Alabama. South Alabama, the Jags had a really good season last year, and Ole Miss. They're on the road against Memphis on a Friday night, which I think will be a tester. They've also
after a bye.
That's right. They've also got UTSA, your UTSA Roadrunners, Dan, another new team in the American that had a lot of success last year and the year prior. That game closes out the season in week 13. But again, the win total is 9.5, and I think that's for good reason. It's because the slate does not seem super daunting, and the roster looks like it's in a really good spot.
I think it's a great schedule. Look, South Alabama nearly beat UCLA on the road last year. The Jags traveled to Tulane, right? New Orleans to start the season. Otherwise, look, all of these teams, by and large, I think Memphis is pretty good, and that's on the road, but it's after a bye week. But North Texas, new coach. Tulsa, new coach. FAU, new coach. Getting UTSA at home is great. And so I'm a big fan of this schedule. If the defense can show what they showed last season, and we saw how Tulane performed early on, they beating Kansas State, correct?
Yeah.
In the first few weeks of the season last year. So this is a team ready to play. Nearly lost to USC, though, Ty. Mm-hmm. You should point that out. USC was right there against the Green Wave. Schedule rules. Rice made a bowl game for the first time in a while last year, and the game's at Rice, and it's at ECU the week after, but ECU starting over at quarterback. There's a lot to like situationally about where Tulane is in terms of getting back to that 9-10 win level.
Yeah, and it looks to me like they're on a collision course with UTSA.
Sure.
In the American. I think Tulane sort of has an inside track to get back to that game. UTSA was 11-3 last year in Conference USA. They move over this year to the American. Their over-under is 7.5. Now, a couple things worth noting about the schedule. Your boy, Big Frankie Harris, is back.
Yeah.
But Zachary Franklin is not. Zachary Franklin just announced that he is transferring over to Ole Miss, the receiver.
On the schedule.
Also, Will Stein is the new offensive coordinator at your Oregon Ducks.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and Tulane lost a co-defensive coordinator, Oregon, as well.
That's right. So there's a lot of Oregon tie-in here with this schedule preview. Jeff Drayler's done a good job at UTSA. I do think that this will be a bit of a step up for the program, for him as a coach. I think that's reflected in the Vegas line, which is 7.5. It is a tough road slate, if you ask me.
Mm-hmm.
At Houston, at Tennessee, at Tulane to close out the year. Not in that order, but scattered throughout the season. It's those three on the road. I do think there's a good chance that they will be playing for an American title in their first year in the conference, presumably against Tulane.
Yeah.
But this is a schedule defined by the first month and by the very end. Because early on, they're on the road at Houston. Texas State, I think, could be kind of plucky. They get Army, and then they close out the month of September against Tennessee on the road. That's a tough schedule. And then obviously closing things out on the road at Tulane, that's going to have a lot to say with who moves on and who doesn't in this conference. I am curious about that Tennessee game in week 4.
Yeah.
UTSA's got a little bit of a longer week to prepare because they play Army Friday in week 3. So an extra day or so.
But don't you always talk about the post-Navy week for
There's
Notre
a body
Dame being
blow
tricky?
thing to
Body
consider.
blow, yeah.
There is a body blow thing to consider. But Tennessee is also coming back home to play that game after the Florida rivalry. And there's a lot new in Knoxville. I'm not particularly worried, but I could see us getting to week 4 and saying, what's the point spread?
I love this early June hedge because I was about to say the exact same things. That, look, we're not saying Tennessee's going to lose to UTSA.
But also...
But we can roll this clip if they do beat Tennessee.
We can carefully edit this clip to make us appear smarter than we are.
Yeah, that's what AI is for, I believe. I know nothing about AI. UTSA schedule's good, but I do worry a little bit because Conference USA has been terrible. And so now the schedule becomes a little bit more difficult just by having... UAB on there, Trent Dilfer's UAB, mind you. Tulane on the road, at Houston, at Tennessee. I mean, that has nothing to do with the American other than Tulane. I think it's good. It's going to be more difficult to, I think, get to the number they've been at the last couple of years. But all things considered, Army wasn't great last year. Texas State, you remember who they hired? G.J. Kinney. God, we're old. He's head coach in college football now. Temple was atrocious last year. FAU starting over, but that's on the road in Boca with Tom Herman. And we mentioned North Texas, Rice, US. Like there's a lot of starting over that's going on in a lot of these schedules, especially in the American. So I'm not especially worried. There might be an adjustment period, but who do you see it coming against? Getting Army at home is great. Getting Temple on the road is great. FAU might be tricky after UAB and before ECU, but no, I'm not terribly worried about the Will Stein thing. I think he's a good offensive coordinator, but Jeff Traylor's been very much internal promotion in terms of hiring new coaches.
A very good CEO coach. Somebody who's
really good.
Somebody who
He's
knows
really
how to
good
kind
coach.
of manage his staff really well.
Yeah. I wish they were a little bit better against the pass going into that Tennessee game. But otherwise, great.
Okay. Let's move over to the MAC. Let's talk about Ohio. 10-4 last year. They lost the conference, but won the bowl game. Their over-under is 7 wins. Honestly, the biggest revelation for me is learning that there is still a Rourke playing football.
Of course, the Canadian dynasty.
Curtis Rourke is still playing. He had a good year last year.
Got hurt, yeah.
Got hurt mid-November against Ball State, but over 3,200 yards passing, 25 touchdowns, only 4 interceptions. I did not realize he had such a good stat line. He is probably the best quarterback in the MAC. This is probably the best offense in the MAC. I think the offense is going to be loaded again. And there are not a whole lot of teams in the MAC that frighten me. So simply by virtue of that, I feel pretty good about this slate. 6 true road games. They're on the road in week 0 at San Diego State, which will be, an early test, probably more so for San Diego State than for Ohio, if I'm being honest. Because San Diego State had a lot of issues last year. But Ohio also on the road at FAU, at Bowling Green, at Northern Illinois, at Buffalo on a Tuesday, and they close out the year at Akron on a Friday. This sets up pretty well to me. They've got Kent State smack dab in the middle. I think Kent State is projected as the worst Power 5 team, or the worst
they
FBS
lost their
team.
coach. Yeah.
The worst FBS team, in all of college football. So this sets up pretty well for, I think, another pretty good run by the Rourke Dynasty, by Frank Solich and the Ohio Bobcats.
I mean, there's just a lot of MAC teams on this MAC schedule, and you know how I feel about the MAC. Like, very few teams are good at both offense and defense, or decent or average on both sides of the ball. Like, you'll see a team that moves the ball super well, and they're like the 114th best defense in the nation when it comes to like points per drive or whatever your preferred metric is. And so, again, if Ohio is simply good, and now that they're not fully starting over at head coach right before the season like they were last year, schedule sets up nicely. They'll probably lose to Iowa State and San Diego State just because I just don't think they have the bodies. But otherwise, it's a lot of flawed teams. Getting the bye before Buffalo, who was one of the more decent teams on both sides of the ball last year. Getting the bye week before Buffalo. Akron was kind of atrocious most of the year last year. Maybe Joe Moorhead will have the Zips a little bit better this year. But no, it's a lot of deeply flawed teams with at least that bye before Buffalo being at a pretty opportune moment.
The bye before Buffalo also applies to Toledo.
Yes, who is good, and Ohio doesn't get Toledo.
That's right, at least not until they presumably play in the MAC championship game, which I think will happen. Again, we're pretty early on talking about this stuff. Toledo's got an over-under of 8.5. I think it's easy to see why if you look at the schedule. Same deal, right? There are a lot of MAC teams on this MAC schedule. There's also a lot of optimism around Toledo, if only because of DeQuan Finn, the quarterback, who's awesome and is probably second best behind Curtis Rourke in the MAC in terms of who's the best quarterback. I suppose you can make a case that he's the best. He's an exciting player to watch. I remember reading something, it was earlier this year. I want to say like February, March time frame from our friend Bill Connolly. And I think Bill's been high on Toledo for as long as I've known him. He's always, it feels to me like he's always high on Toledo. And he said as much in the article. I'm probably paraphrasing here because I don't remember it all that well. But his point was just that this is a team this year that seems like it's primed to take a jump. They've got the schedule to do that. The question is, will they? It always seems like they fall short for one reason or another. And I happen to agree. They do have a tough stretch with 3 straight road games in October. They've got 2 straight road games to close out the year. But I'm not looking at this and I'm feeling like intimidated by any of these opponents. It seems like if they are actually a good team with good players, they should be able to skate through this and hit the over.
Agree. I'm right there with you. And Toledo, it's that Miami of Ohio game, I guess. The 3rd straight road game. Miami had a pretty decent defense last year, but the offense was pretty horrendous. So not terrified of much on this Toledo schedule. At Illinois will probably be a loss. Though, I don't know. Week 1, weirdness. Who knows?
A little bit of Tommy DeFito. Never know.
But otherwise, all of the kind of losable games are at home. So that's kind of nice for me. Siobhan Cordero still at San Jose State. I mean, he was Hawaii before San Jose State, but still a college quarterback. But otherwise, Western Michigan's offense fell off a cliff. NIU defense fell off a cliff. Like, UMass has been not good. And it's great. Buffalo's at home. Eastern Michigan at home. Great. Love it.
Let's go to the Mountain West. Talk about Boise. You look at the schedule?
What a run.
Man.
What a September.
Here is the way that this thing starts off for Boise. They're on the road at Washington, and they come back home to play UCF. They also go to San Diego State, and I believe close out September on the road at Memphis, which is a pretty tough September, if you ask me. Beyond that, they also got to go to Fort Collins to play against Colorado State. They go to Fresno in mid-October. They go to Utah State, second to last week of the season. To my eye, they've got 3 pairs of games that are going to define their season. The early tandem that we just outlined at Washington home against UCF weeks 1 and 2. That'll be tough.
Mm-hmm.
Then week 4 and week 5 at San Diego State on a Friday, at Memphis, week 5 on a Saturday, presumably. I think Memphis will be a tough test for them. And then to close out the year, well, towards the end of the year, I should say, after the bye, week 9 and 10, home against Wyoming. Wyoming brings a lot back, and I think Wyoming could be pretty good. And then the following week on the road at Fresno. Fresno we'll talk about next. They've got some of their own issues to contend with. If Boise's able to play defense again at a top 30 level, that definitely equips them better to hit the over 7.5 that Vegas assigned them. But I don't know. This is a tough slate.
Yeah, I mean, don't have the full list of who's returning for Boise and returning for everybody on the schedule. But in terms of that opener against Washington, it's a little scary for the Huskies.
Yeah.
It's a little scary. Boise was, I think, the number 2 team in the country in terms of forcing 3 and outs. They were one of the most efficient pass defenses in the nation, and that was in dealing with an offense that was kind of awful the first month of the season until they made the move to Talon Green. So if Boise's defense is anywhere near as good against the pass, near as good as they were about getting off the field, near as good as they were about, blitzing and confusing teams on 3rd and long, I don't feel good about, Washington at least running away with this game, UCF winning that game.
Right.
And after that, the home road splits are, I know they're just kind of average, but getting Air Force at home is pretty clutch to me. We'll see what, I think it's a Logan Fife Fresno team.
We're going to talk about
super promising.
We're going to talk about that
but
next.
That's tough. But if Boise has a legit defense, they'll beat San Diego State. Memphis will be tough on the road in second straight road game. They'll beat San Jose State. They'll beat Colorado State. They'll beat Wyoming. They have a good shot against Fresno. New Mexico they'll beat. Utah State probably, but it's in a tough look ahead spot with Air Force. But I still think we're talking about a 9-3 kind of Boise season.
You feel better about them than I do. But
again, it's all contingent on Talon Green and defense, but that's my rubric. It's quarterback and defense, and Talon Green beat up on the teams he should beat up on, had some struggly moments against the tougher opponents, and now has a full offseason as the guy. So I don't hate this schedule.
Well, speaking to that rubric, quarterback and defense, Fresno's defense returns a lot from a defense that was pretty good a year ago, and I think that will serve them well. On the quarterback side, though, we're talking about the law firm of Mikey Keenan, Logan Fife.
Right.
One of those two, maybe both, are going to lead the offense for the Bulldogs this year because Jake Haener went pro and did that wonderful photo shoot. I don't know if you saw it with the Saints.
So that was the Saints. Yeah. Of course I saw it.
Wonderful photo shoot. Make
Flirty,
sure you go and find
seductive.
Yeah, just really all the feels. All the feels. I liked Mikey Keene at UCF. I liked it, but here's the qualifier, okay? The qualifier is the guy in front of him got hurt and they had to put him in. And I thought it was more a compliment to the coaching staff with how they kind of retooled the offense and fit the scheme or fit the talents of Mikey Keene in order to make that thing work.
You're talking 2 years ago.
2
Last
years
year
ago.
he was just beat out by
2 years
John
ago.
Rice Plumlee. Yeah.
That was when I felt really good about Mikey Keene, okay?
Yeah. Okay.
I'm not so excited about Mikey being the man. Mikey the man is like, I don't know how I feel about that. And I'm not saying I feel any better about Logan Fife. So that part to me is a little bit worrying, the quarterback side of this for Fresno, especially after all these years of Jake Haener playing at a pretty high level, obviously getting drafted into the NFL. The schedule, I don't know how to feel about the schedule. Like, it's not overpowering to me. There are no guaranteed losses, in my opinion. I could see 10-2. I could see 6-6. I could see 5-7. I don't really know what to make of this. Their big non-conference road games are at Purdue and at Arizona State, both of which have new coaches, both of which are early. So I think that bodes well for them. They should beat East.
Both of which are situationally nice. I think
Very
it's
nice.
Purdue before they have Virginia Tech and Syracuse, and then it's ASU the week before SC, correct?
Yep.
All right.
I mean, there are
Not
wins
terrible.
on here. There are guaranteed wins on here. Eastern Washington, Kent State, Nevada, those should all be wins. New Mexico should be there's enough on here that I think hitting their over-under of 8.5 is very much in play. But with that uncertainty at quarterback, and again, we'll talk much more about this when we do Mountain West previews. but at least at recording time here in early June, I'm just sort of mixed on this.
It was a good defense last year that gave up big plays, but otherwise was good. Great secondary. I don't know. If we're going to trust Jeff Tedford with quarterback development, which I think is pretty fair to do, the track record is pretty decent, then we say Fresno should be good, and they should brush up against double-digit wins if they can avoid what was a pretty atrocious start last year, and some of that had to do with injury. I think they'll be good. It's a good schedule.
Air Force.
Especially with, look how much new is on this schedule as well. But yeah.
Air Force. Do you look at Air Force?
Of course I did. I love Air Force. You know about me in Air Force. It's the United States Air Force.
Air Force plays at home once in the last 6 weeks of the season.
It's tricky, but it's against some bad teams.
At Navy, at Colorado State. There's a neutral sider that they're playing at Mile High against Army, which would be a cool venue, actually, for that game.
Yeah.
On the road at Hawaii, week 11, back home for their only home game of that stretch against UNLV. They close out the year at Boise on a Friday night.
Sure. I just think they're excellent. I don't know. I don't have their roster in front of me. I don't have the changes in front of them.
There's a lot new.
There's a lot new, but if you're running it and playing defense, which is all they've been doing these past few years, they'll win 10 games.
Yep. 10th rated SP Plus defense last year, and about 70% of that production is back. So if they're powered by anything, it's going to be the defense. My guy, Zeke Daniels, is gone, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But
they beat up on, who did they beat in the super cold bowl game? Baylor?
Yeah.
Right? In like the 15-degree Texas Bowl, whatever it was. There's a lot of winnable games on this schedule.
There are.
Just is.
There are.
Navy starting over. Army still will probably struggle. Hawaii is starting over still. UNLV starting over. Colorado State was awful last year for long stretches. Wyoming is at Air Force. So I don't know. San Diego State's offense has been terrible. I think they scored 3 points against Air Force last year. They start with what? Bobby Moe and Sammy Houston. By the way, plug alert, Ty.
Yeah.
Sam Houston was a clue on Extra Nuggets.
Boom!
Extranuggets.show.
There it is.
Sam Houston, a founding father of the state of Texas, the Republic of Texas, nicknamed Big Drunk by a group of Native Americans after he had a falling out in politics in the state of Tennessee. But fascinating dude. Sam Houston, learned a lot, and I think he's worth investigating further. Anyway, great schedule. Bobby Moe, Sammy Houston. San
Diego State, let's close out our Mountain West previews with San Diego State.
Mm-hmm.
They went 7-6 a year ago.
Yeah.
Lost a bowl game in Middle Tennessee. The over-under is 7. The first 6 weeks of this schedule are brutal. They are just brutal. Ohio in week 0. And I think Ohio's going to be pretty good. I said it before. That's a tester.
I know, but it's MAC good. But yeah.
MAC good, fine. But that game is of interest. Idaho State, week 1, whatever. UCLA at home, week 2. That'll be tough. Mm-hmm. On the road at Oregon State, week 3. That'll be tough. Back home against Boise in week 4 on a Friday. So short week.
Short week from the road.
After Corvallis. Yeah. And then on top of all of that, week 5 at altitude on the road against Air Force.
Yeah.
Some big time body blow potential for all the games that follow. Now they're on bye after Air Force. And the schedule does, I think, ease up considerably from week 6 on. But you got to get through that stretch first. And I think it's going to be a real challenge, especially for a team that struggled as they did on offense.
Mm-hmm. I don't have any faith in the San Diego State team this year. Again, don't know the roster, don't know the situations in and out, but doesn't seem great. It doesn't seem great for San Diego State that they are just not bringing an offense likely to this schedule. And the way it starts out, look, there's a lot to like about the exercise on the back half of this schedule. People are going to be burning calories for San Diego State in ways that we could not have anticipated in early June. But otherwise, it's going to be a San Diego State team that goes 6-6, 5-7 or something if they don't have their act together early on. And then we're talking about the Pac-12 saying, you want to be my latex salesman, right? That like, you want to be, this is who you want, Pac-12? This Brady Hoke 5-7? Okay. And so
do you still have the Brady Hoke voice at your disposal?
No, I blew that vocal cord out years ago. It's just something like that.
Let's close things out with the Sun Belt, Fun Belt.
Yeah.
Got 4 teams here. Got App State, Coastal Carolina. James Madison can talk a little JMU.
Sure.
And the Troy Trojans. Troy Trojans, by the way, won the conference last year. They beat Coastal. They won the bowl game over UTSA, the aforementioned Roadrunners. Went 12-2, so it was a really nice campaign for the Troy Trojans. This season, they've got Kansas State on schedule. I think that'll be an interesting early test for K-State.
Mm-hmm.
The back-to-back tandem of K-State and JMU, I think, will be difficult for Troy. I don't think JMU will be quite what it was a year ago, but this is a schedule that's got decent buffers. I can play it. Didn't play it yet today. It seems like it's set up pretty well for a team that really found itself last year. And the question is, can they continue? Can they continue with that momentum now into 2023? The schedule would seemingly set up for that.
Yeah. They played a good amount of defense last year, a great amount of defense last year, which is good news if you're playing Virginia. If that is the Power 5 team you have on the road early on, it's good news because they were terrible on offense last year. Otherwise, the back half of the schedule is just really difficult, right? That they are going to have to prove it with depth and adjustments, whatever. Just having the Marshall defense, I think that's Thursday night game. Georgia State, decent. App State should again be decent, although they're, Chase Bryce has gone after 9 years in college football, and it's at Coastal to finish things out. But I don't know. I'm a big believer in coaching and aggression on defense, and so JMU should be in a good spot this year.
Let's talk about JMU. You want to talk anything further about JMU? They've got an interesting stretch here in the beginning.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about right now.
Yeah.
JMU, yeah.
Bucknell, week 1, the Nellies.
Yeah. No, the opening stanza is all together. I mean, look, the Troy defense on the road, not a fan of getting that. And that's 3 road games in a row early on.
UVA, Troy,
it's
and
a tough
Utah
schedule.
State. Yeah.
They're going to take a step back this year. But still, I think they're going to be a bowl team, just maybe only a number, but yeah.
App State and Coastal to close out the year. Won't be great. App State, by the way, 6-6 a year ago. Interesting factoid here that may only interest me. Won 6 games, but didn't qualify for a bowl because 2 of those wins were against Robert Morris and the Citadel.
Right.
2 FCS teams. They're over under 6.5 this year. They play another matchup against UNC. This one in week 2. You remember the game from week 1 a year ago, 63-61. They lost that game, all the points.
Mm-hmm.
There's also an interesting matchup after a bye in week 7 at home on a Tuesday night against Coastal Carolina, which I think will obviously be circled in advance.
It's the annual explosion, yeah.
The annual explosion. There's a game week 12 at JMU. We don't necessarily know what to expect from JMU. Last year was really only their first year in FBS. There's also a game in here week 4 at Wyoming.
Yeah.
I think Wyoming
Altitude,
will be
baby.
decent. I think Wyoming will be decent, and so that will be a challenge. I think Vegas got the 6.5 over under correct, because when I went through, as I said on the last episode, where I'm looking at schedules and trying to piece together, all right, how many wins am I seeing? I came to about 5 or 6.
There's a lot of losable games on
there
this
really
schedule.
are, right?
There are. The UNC, Wyoming, Old Dominion's offense, last year was really, really bad. But again, Panthers and JMU consecutive weeks after playing what was the clear best defense in the Sun Belt last year with Marshall. I don't know, man. There's a lot of tough on here, especially the back half.
Close things out with Coastal Carolina.
Yes.
And let's talk about week 1 on the road at UCLA.
Yeah, they're going to lose that game. I don't know. What do you want me to tell you?
I was trying to set up a dramatic interlude.
They don't have a defense to win that game.
No.
Okay.
No, the month of September otherwise. It's at UCLA week 1. I think they probably lose that game. But they've got Jacksonville State, Duquesne, and Georgia State all at home before they close out September with Georgia Southern on the road. After a bye in week 6, at App State, at Arkansas State, home against Marshall, on the road at ODU, Texas State, at Army, close out the year at JMU. I think it's a reasonably difficult back half of the schedule for Coastal Carolina.
Arkansas State is terrible. ODU might be terrible. Texas State's, and GJ Kinney, all due respect, starting over. I don't know. I think it's fine. I just don't know how much often you can win with just offense. By the way, Jacksonville State, new to Conference USA, I believe. Rich Rod's Jacksonville State.
Yep.
As far as I can tell, they'd like to start a quarterback who does not yet know if he is eligible to play this season in Zion Webb. And he's appealing because he got hurt in 2021 and was very good for them last year. And so Rich Rod doesn't know if he has a starting quarterback who is allowed to play yet. But he played in the spring, got like provisional eligibility. But we'll see. That's tough. We remember Jacksonville State from a couple of years ago with Florida State.
Yeah.
This is not a nothing program. They won a ton of games last year, and they're making the move up now. We'll see. And that's after the UCLA game.
Yeah, rushed for 13 touchdowns in 2022. Had close to 6 yards of carry, so definitely a dual threat guy who can step in
And a
there.
new coach.
And a new coach.
So
And a new coach, yeah. A lot going on. All right. We will cover more G5 teams as we go through this offseason,
Sure.
certainly as we get into previews and start talking about the real brass tacks of the coming season. Keep it tuned right here, Solid Verbal. Go to solidverbal.com. That's our website. Hit subscribe, hit follow, tell your friends, follow along on social media. If you want to support what we do, go to verballers.com, Dan.
totally true story, Ty. I don't remember the exact scenario, but I had a phone call with somebody for work. I think it was when I was at SI. I can't be positive, but I think it was way back when, 2007, 2008. And this person said, all right, let's get down to brass tacks.
No.
And in my head, having never heard that phrase as like a 23-year-old somewhere in there, I thought there was a brass tax, TAX, that I was like, man, I really don't know grown-up business because this whole brass tax has completely eluded me. And then it's one of those things where you don't know verbiage, you don't know slang, and you're really dumb until at some point in life as a grown-up you become slightly less dumb. And I hope that's where I am right now, because for a solid week I kept Googling how much do I owe in brass taxes.
Oh, boy. Then you watch Better Call Saul, and you sort of blew the lid on it.
Yeah, it's true.
All right. That does it for our schedule previews. Again, solidverbal@gmail.com is the email address if you want to write in. Let us know what we got right, what we got wrong. We post these videos out on YouTube as well. So if you've got comments, you can offer them there as well. If you're there, make sure you smash the like button, as the kids like to say, and hit subscribe to the channel. We're trying to grow that as well. Daniel.
Yes.
I'll talk to you next week.
I hope so.
For that guy over there, Dan Rubenstein, for myself, Ty Hildenbrandt. Talk to you soon. Stay solid.
Peace.